ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Nadler, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Antitrust Division had around 1,000 staffers in 1979, but today, even though the division is tasked with overseeing a bigger economy and companies that are bigger than some nation states, the division has just a little more than half that staff. Despite the lack of adequate resources, the division is enforcing the law at historic levels, reviewing over 3,500 transactions in your first year at the division, a record. Mr. Cantor, how is your work affected by insufficient resources, and how can Congress help support your work through appropriations?
So as the economy has grown, the complexity of antitrust cases have grown exponentially, and the amount of information and the significance of concentration to the American public has grown. We, as you point out, have over 200 fewer people today than we had in 1979, and that's against the backdrop of an expanding economy. It is essential that we have the resources necessary to keep pace with the issues that affect so many Americans, whether it's a farmer looking for a reasonable return on livestock, consumer looking for affordable air travel, or a consumer concerned about making sure that there's enough choice so that they can get access to private communication services. These are issues that affect every American and we care about deeply. Without sufficient resources, we can't adequately protect the American public from the harms that flow from anti-competitive conduct and unlawful concentration.
And you have half the staff that you did in 1979.
I go back and find the specific numbers, but when I started at the Antitrust Division, we had over 350 fewer people than we had in 1979.
Thank you. Recently, governments around the world have closely analyzed online market concentration. Governments from Japan to Brazil, Australia to the EU, and even our own committee have deeply investigated the online market, finding that the high level of harmful consolidation and anti-competitive conduct necessitates new rules and protections. In 2016, the Chamber of Commerce urged the executive branch to coordinate more closely with foreign governments, and I ask unanimous consent to enter their letter into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. But now that such international coordination is resulting in real change, the Chamber is pushing back on the international coordination they called for so forcefully. Mr. Cantor, can you share the division's perspective on international coordination?
So first and foremost, our job is to make sure that we can enforce U.S. laws in U.S. courts. For decades, there's a bipartisan tradition of making sure that we have the appropriate level of coordination because we live in a global economy with international enforcers so that we can understand how their actions abroad and their laws abroad may or may not affect our domestic priorities. And so we've continued that tradition, but at all points, our goal is to make sure that we are enforcing U.S. law in U.S. courts and protecting our interest to enforce U.S. law in U.S. courts.
Thank you. The DOJ won a court victory in 2022, last year, that blocked a merger between two of the 5 big publishing houses, Penguin Random House and Simon & Schuster. I believe you referred to this in your opening statement. This decisive victory was premised on the fact that, according to the DOJ, the merger would be bad for workers. In this case, the writers would get paid less if the two companies consolidated. As you said of the approach, we said that workers matter. This kind of harm matters. In addition to this case, the department has also taken workers into account in the draft merger guidelines under consideration at the DOJ and the FTC. Mr. Cantor, can you speak more about how antitrust enforcement is critical for workers?
Absolutely. I think we can all know from our own personal experiences that when we have competition for our labor, we get better salaries, we get better benefits, we get better working conditions. If workers have choice, they can earn more money, they can be mobile, they can work not just doing what they want to do, but where they want to do it, whether it's in a rural community or an urban community. And so the antitrust laws were designed by Congress not just to protect the ability of consumers to get lower prices. That's an important objective of the antitrust laws. But it is essential that workers, particularly hardworking people working for an hourly wage, have the ability to benefit from competition.
Thank you, Mr. Cantor. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.